cartoons I picked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You like those ones?
excellent.
Do you like me put?
Excellent, yeah.
Would you like me putting in the company of those two?
Yeah, they are after my.
We'll get started if everybody could just settle down a little bit, and we'll get going. I'd like to welcome everyone this afternoon. My name is Mark Nelson. I'm the Senior Director for the Center for International Media Assistance here at the National Endowment for Democracy. On behalf of SEMA and the International Forum for Democratic Studies, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's presentation, which is entitled Resisting Extremism Through Media, Claiming a Space for Political Cartoons in Pakistan. It's featuring Reagan Fassel Democracy Fellow Sabir Nazar, and we're also glad to have with us sitting next to him Brian Joseph, who is a Senior Director for Asia and Global Programs here at the NET. Funded by the U.S. Congress and the Reagan Fassel Democracy Fellows Program hosts some of the world's most dedicated democracy activists, scholars and journalists to conduct independent research and pursue projects here at the NET. The program has hosted more than 200 fellows from over 80 countries since its founding in 2001. We at SEMA are especially happy to partner with the Reagan Fassel program on this event because Sabir's work on expanding boundaries of media in Pakistan falls squarely within our mandate to strengthen, support, raise the visibility, and improve the effectiveness of independent media throughout the world. Indeed, in his short time here at the NED, Sabir has created a new awareness of the power and controversy of cartoons, particularly in a complex place like Pakistan. Over the last few months, we have interacted with him in meetings and discussions here, and he has usually been sitting there drawing or sketching some idea or person, sometimes making us a little bit nervous. His cartoons are powerful and often summarize in a single image a very difficult or multifaceted idea, and he does it in a way that cuts across linguistic and cultural boundaries. Pakistan, as I'm sure you all know, is experiencing a new wave of restrictions on the production of visual arts and media. This trend is part of a broader agenda that is having an impact across all of the arts, including dance, music, and theater. Moreover, recent attacks on journalists also serve to silence moderate voices and reinforce and propel a conservative ideology. So in his discussion today, Sabir will be using his widely acclaimed political cartoons, his well-known cartoons that people really know well in Pakistan, to discuss the challenges that are faced by the media and the struggle for democracy. He will also be expanding on ways that the visual arts and the visual artists can contribute through different kinds of media to reclaim the cultural space that is under attack by extremists. First, let me give you a little bit about his resume. He is an editorial cartoonist with the Express Tribune, which is Pakistan's first internationally affiliated newspaper. He's also partnered with the International New York Times and the Friday Times, which is Pakistan's first independent weekly newspaper. He's also a contributor to popular magazines such as Newsweek Pakistan and The Herald. Over the course of his career, he has produced over 5,000 illustrations depicting a broad spectrum of political events and social issues. In addition, he has illustrated cartoons, posters, publications, and other types of media for a number of human rights and development organizations. And he's received a variety of prestigious awards in recognition of his work. Next to him, Brian Joseph is Senior Director for Asia and Global Programs here at NED. He's spoken widely and written about Burma, Pakistan, Thailand, human rights in Asia, and democracy promotion in closed societies. He's testified before the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations Subcommittee on East Asia and Public Affairs and the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. And he's provided high-level briefings for State Department officials and lectured at the Foreign Service Institute. He formerly served as a volunteer South Asia Regional Coordinator for Amnesty International and is a member of the International Human Rights Funders Group and the Burma Donors Forum. So before I get started, I just want to remind you that for those of you who are on Twitter, you can follow this presentation and contribute to the conversation by using the hashtag NED events, or by following the forum at Think Democracy and the endowment at Ned Democracy. So if you have not already done so, please silence your cell phones, and let me take this opportunity to thank the people who helped put this event together, and especially Sarah Amin, who has offered a lot of assistance, and Valerie Popper, who worked with us, and everybody else who worked on this together to pull this thing together. So to get this started, I'd like to just turn to Sabir and ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your work.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I also want to thank NAD for providing me this break, actually much needed break to reflect and to improve on my work. And I think the timing was really perfect because newspapers and journalists were under attack in Pakistan, especially my paper that was attacked 7 times actually. So I think that break coming to NAD was a blessing in disguise. So I really thank you all, and also for the opportunity to meet great fellow friends actually who are doing a tremendous job in their own countries, and they are actually a source of inspiration, and I've learned a lot from that. So I mean, thank you all. And I'll take this opportunity to thank my politicians, the military and religious leaders also, because they have been providing ideas for 23 years. And that kept my kitchen running. So actually, I think, I hope that in the future they would also, support us and won't let us down. So about myself, actually, I was born in a small city, Kohat, that's very near to Peshawar city. And I was the eldest of my siblings, and it was actually my father who encouraged me to watercolors and drawing at a very early age. And I think it was probably my 5th birthday or 6th, he gave me a watercolor set actually that actually sealed my fate. So later he tried to discourage me, and he was really disappointed when I left architecture in 3rd year and joined fine arts, because he thought that artists usually dig their graves with their brushes. And he was very afraid about my future, because at that time I think the artist, that wasn't a paying profession. Mm-hmm. Not now, I think. So I graduated in 1988, and as you can see from my, paintings, especially this, where all the cultural expressions are under the wings of a giant vulture. So, and another painting that's about a legend of Raja Rasalu, who actually fights an evil king because and liberates his people. So actually, if you see, I used the local legends and myths, but their subject is already a political. I have a political angle, so it was easier for me to shift to cartooning. So next, yeah. Actually, that slide I usually show in Pakistan, because a lot of people think that cartoonists actually don't need craftsmanship because they just have to draw distorted drawings.
But this is actually a work you produced yourself, right? This is a sculpture, right? That's actually...
Yeah, that's a sculpture installed at a very public crossing in Lahore. That's the Defense Housing Society. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you became a cartoonist. What took you from being an artist doing this sort of culturally sensitive sort of stuff about the environment to being a cartoonist?
But actually, that was a pure accident. My friend and roommate Liaquat Ali was working at weekly the Friday Times. So actually, he got an offer from a daily newspaper with a higher package. So he said that I should, work for just 1 month at his place, so that if he doesn't like his new job, then he can come back to the Friday Times. And he didn't come back. He's now in New York. And he settled his own altogether different business. So, that's how I started for the Friday Times. And since I could do watercolors, my editor decided that that he would. My color cartoon is now on the front page of that weekly paper, and ever since I've been working for the Friday Times from 1991.
So going into the area of political cartoons, you've moved into an area of really controversial and really difficult issues. And I'm interested in hearing a little bit about the kinds of pressures that cartoonists face and the harassment that you've experienced in your experience.
Yes, actually, especially in Pakistan, but I would say it's all over the world actually, that we face actually three pressures that I think are very important. One is the religious, because in a lot of religion, the word is considered as sacred and at times as a word of God. So there is a sacredness attached to the word instead of image. And there were some periods in history where the images were actually destroyed, that we call as iconoclasm. Mm-hmm. And recently we saw, this blackening of advertisement billboards in Pakistan, and especially if you see the destruction of Bamiyan Buddhas. So, there was generally religious tilt towards the words. And then the print media is itself a text-dominated medium. If you see, it's 70 or 80% text, and then 20 or 30% images or photographs. And especially in Pakistan, cartoons actually recently acquired a editorial place. And still, I think a lot of people consider cartoons not as a political commentary, but as a comic relief on very serious opinion pages. And thirdly, I think the cartoon is just a recent phenomenon in subcontinent. It came with the Britishers, and that's why we see cartoons in English papers always. While in Urdu language papers or vernacular press, they are just used as you can see, the two between these two, sandwiched between these two ads actually. And I think they probably didn't have an important news. Otherwise, I think they could have killed this cartoon. And that's my newspaper, the Friday Times, where you can see the color cartoon on the front page. So actually, that's quite an expensive space that I'm getting in the Friday Times.
This one shows President Obama at the end of a tank and saying, "Attack on Iran can be very dangerous."
Yeah, that was, I think, a very old cartoon. I think it was 2008.
2008. Well, tell us a little bit about the techniques that you use to deal with these hot button issues, about these difficult issues. What are some of the ways of managing that in a cultural context like Pakistan?
Yes, but before I talk about those issues, I'll just try to explain. Usually, because we speak with images, and we are not writers, so if you see the structure of an article, it starts with an intro, and there's a logical progression of argument, and it's actually a very linear progression, and then there's a conclusion. But we cartoonists actually say everything in just one picture, and that's everything is there, and there's no actually start and there's no conclusion. So it's a different method of visualizing, and also, I mean, I think there's only one structure in cartoons, to create humor, and that is that uh, we put together two conflicting, contradictory, and at times irrational elements together. That's how we create our message, and at times we produce this laughter. As you can see here, the world revolving around that shows the soccer fever actually
Right.
during this month of July.
Yeah.
So, and also, we use uh, certain symbols and totems that are, for some people, are very, very sacred, and they have some attachment with those. So, if you are asked, if we are asked to say, to tell us about Pakistan, we would need, as the Chinese saying goes, we'll need 1,000 words to describe the Pakistan. But we actually represent it with just the flag, and that's this flag actually, the white portion shows the minorities and the religion in Pakistan, and the green portion shows the Muslim majority in Pakistan. And that's what I have done here. I've shown this religious jihadi actually uh, shrinking this white space, because there were a lot of attacks on Shias and Ahmadis and Christians during 2012. So since we deal with those images, and if you remember, the American cartoonist Daryl Kegel's cartoon on Mexico, that actually produced such strong reaction, because those flags and those totems, they are, for some people, they are very sacred and revered. And actually, if you remember, we burn those flags in all demonstrations. So we deal with those symbols and images. And secondly, there's this is a painting of the Locre on the French Revolution. So I made this. Actually, it's not a cartoon; it's an illustration, because that was such a tragic event in Pakistan's history. So I think that's probably the first illustration that I did for the Friday Times. So I've actually derived my idea from this painting, because I wanted to relate these two aspects of democracy and the assassination of Benazir, because there was a lot of other discussions. So also I want to expand the visual vocabulary within Pakistan. So I borrow from all other sources, the sources that can actually help us say our story. And then, this Egyptian, when this military actually toppled the elected government of Morsi. But that's also one of our indirect methods. Sometimes, instead of criticizing dictatorship within your country, we actually use the indirect method, criticizing dictatorship in Saddam and sometimes in Egypt would actually indirectly point to that dictatorship within our country. So then I actually, that was a very famous incident, I think. If you remember, Raymond Davis, he was arrested for, killing reportedly armed men, but that's not actually this, because established, that's why it's reportedly armed men in Pakistan. So the debate was whether the Raymond Davis has diplomatic immunity or not, and I think the Pakistan was divided, and they thought it's a real opportunity to try him in Pakistan. And that's what I've showed the government and the politicians, even the opposition, how they were divided about this issue. And since a lot of people really don't like or against India. There are anti-Indian sentiments in Pakistan. So I sometimes, love to depict events in Indian symbolism. That really makes them sometimes edgy.
So you've been thinking a bit about, the role that cartoons play in democratic culture. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your thoughts on that whole thing.
About, sorry?
About the role that cartoons play in democratic cultures.
Yeah, I think because it has, I believe that the origin of cartoons started from the 16th century. That was actually against the orthodox dogma of the church. Initially, I think that started, but it as a different genre, it started in 18th or 19th century from France and then England and then, of course, America. We know about Thomas. So it definitely has a link with democracy, and I think it gives the citizen a critical voice also, and held the leaders accountable for. Also, I think in our case, I think it's not just the freedom of speech, but it's also the freedom to produce images. As I said, there's a restriction on painting, and it's sometimes considered as sin in Pakistan. And I think because cartoons deal with those images, those totems, and they actually challenge some images that we have. So it challenges those taboos, and therefore I think it creates a tolerance for a different point of view. But essentially, I think the cartoons have this quality of equalizer because it cuts people down to size, especially that's why authoritarian and dictator rulers, they don't like cartoons. And if you see, they always put up the larger-than-life statues and pictures in the country. If you remember Saddam's Iraq, I think. So that's what's the purpose of the cartooning.
So show us some of your examples. I think you've got a lot of examples here. That'll be very interesting to see what you've done.
I mean, that's an unpublished cartoon on the recent events after these attacks of the kind of space that right now we have in Pakistan. I think that could be made by a caliper, actually. That's this.
Right.
And I mean, a lot of people say that Pakistan is a fertile ground for conspiracy theories. That's cartoon I made in, I think it was 2010, because I think 2009 and 10 saw the peak in suicide bombings and attacks in Pakistan, and Pakistan was being called as the capital of suicide bombing, actually. But with that rate, actually, there was conspiracy theories also in Pakistan. So actually, to cover the criminal acts of these extremists, and always put the blame at the foreign powers who want to destabilize Pakistan. And there are, certain issues and certain areas that are actually no-go areas and taboos. For example, making a cartoon of the founding father of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So that's actually 2003 cartoon that I made because all of the different shades of politicians and even military, they were trying to reinterpret the vision of Muhammad Ali Jinnah according to their own political agendas. So, I mean, every year it's on the New Year, or whether it's Mother's Day or Valentine's Day, actually, there are vigilante groups. They actually sometimes attack some homes or some hotels if there is a New Year party going on, or they would disrupt the stalls of Valentine's Day's cards they are selling. So I made a cartoon on that. I've shown a religious, actually, leader with a thick skin, I think the Cupid would have a tough job piercing his, his skin. And then this, I mean, it's also a taboo to depict a woman in not in a skin tight clothing. Actually, that would, if she's not in a chador or a veil, that's also. And actually, I got a lot of hate mail on this cartoon because that, it's in a bad taste. I mean, whatever is going on the roads is not bad taste, but depicting is a bad taste. So, and actually there is a rise of sexual harassment. Even a law was passed against sexual harassment. And as you can see, the anti-sexual harassment bill was actually renamed in the parliament as Women Protection Bill because they didn't want the word sexual in that bill. And then, of course, there are religious restrictions. I mean, these days you cannot, that's an unpublished cartoon in 2011, the Governor Tasir and then the Minister Minorities, Shahbaz Bhatti, was assassinated, and no actually paper would allow anything that would touch this subject of blasphemy. That's what printed, in fact, outside Pakistan. So, I mean, I can get away with it. Otherwise, within Pakistan, there was no way to comment on. And I think that's being used as a tool to suppress your opposition. Even recently, I think one popular channel was closed down because of charges of blasphemy. That's a cartoon that I made on the alphabet books that were actually being printed in Karachi and that were sent to the FATA area where they were taught in low-income schools and madrasas. And they actually had the same, like this one, I think, and the jihad, not like the suicide bomber, but jihad. And there was another that showed actually the burning of TV, CDs, and musical instruments. That's again on 2010 when there was a peak in suicide bombing, and I thought maybe they would, gate crash the heaven actually and force the keeper to open the door for them. If they had strong arm tactics. I mean, I think now ISIS is on this way in Iraq. Yeah. Well, this was a cartoon that really put me in the most dangerous period of my life, actually. This cartoon was printed in an Urdu daily article. And I mean, as you remember, in 2006, Lal Mosque and their adjacent girls' madrasa, they actually started demonstrating against the government. They kidnapped Chinese women. They burned the CDs. And they set on fire the government building close to them. And in fact, in those demonstrations, they killed army rangers also. So the army operation against Lal Mosque in this compound was, I think, conducted in 2007. And that killed actually 150 people. So after, I think, some months, they were protesting. The head of that girls' madrasa was protesting that she wanted that madrasa to open because the time of those girl students was being wasted. I mean, on the one hand, they were destroying girls' schools in Swat and all those FATA areas, but here she was, wanted to open that madrasa school. So I made a cartoon, and this blackboard says that she's teaching them how to kidnap Chinese girls. And that actually produced a very strong reaction, and actually I wrote the name of that head of girls' madrasa, and that also, I think if it's very easy to generally target someone, but it's very dangerous if you name a specific person. So our newspaper was being guarded by the army rangers for 3 months, and we would constantly get the threats. I would also get the phone calls, faxes on this, that I should apologize for this cartoon. And actually, there were 2 bomb scares at our office. And my editor actually got Golden Pen Award for publishing this cartoon. That's also, I mean, it's a very difficult when you criticize, especially the army and the judiciary. I mean, in 2010, they were really, it looked as if they were about to roll this whole democratic setup, and we see that the last government of PPP, it was constantly being, I mean, it completed its 5 year, but they were constantly on the back foot, and there will always be some cases one on another in the Supreme Court, and actually it's one of the Prime Minister was disqualified by the Supreme Court. So that's what I made, how the media, the judges, and the military are conspiring against democracy in Pakistan. That's one is about the civil and military, relationships. It was also after this Abbottabad raid targeting Osama bin Laden. And all those politicians, I mean, of the government or the opposition or even the religious parties, they were all united with the army to condemn the United States for violating Pakistan's sovereignty, but actually nobody said anything about, the killing of the #1 terrorist in the world. That whether it was, I think our president said this, but that was also within United States, not in Pakistan. So they were actually all in line with, actually that shows the color of the political parties, and that's the head of the political party. As the military medals. I mean, that's also in Pakistan is mustache is used as symbol of honor. So our policies are mostly driven honor, or you can say not about the economic or the economic benefits for the people, but it's mostly either the security issues or it's about their role within the region. And as one scholar said, that Pakistan is rather a warrior state than a trading state. So that I showed, that's a very recent cartoon, July 2014. It's a 2004 cartoon actually, and at that time, I mean, mentioning that I showed this, the boundary of Pakistan, and all these tents are installed within the boundary. At that time, I mean, nobody actually would mention the name of Al-Qaeda. Even that was contested, and they thought that it's just a figment of imagination, and it was created by America just to create an excuse to attack Afghanistan and then Iraq. So there is no such thing as Al-Qaeda. And always the religious political parties would always say that only engage them politically. And whenever there is a military operation against them, they would say, oh, they are our brothers who are misguided, by some elements. And they were, I think, that's where started suicide bombings in Pakistan, I think in 2003 and 2004. This cartoon was for the backdrop of theatrical production, interactive resource center, and it shows Pakistan as a partner in war and terror, and with this is a dual policy that's actually.
So as we conclude, why don't you tell us a little bit overall how you would describe what you've done in your career as a cartoonist? What has it all been about, and what does it mean?
I think I was in a position that I could see as a painter in Pakistan with religious background and in a newspaper. So I saw there is a conflict of word and image, and the role of image is not realized. As we see, it's not so negative. I mean, we see now the graphic novels, now we see the image therapy, so audio-visual training. So, I mean, the visuals or the images are coming for their real role. So, my actually work was, the project here was to compile book of cartoons that would not only just won't be the showcase of my work, but it should narrate the history of the political history of Pakistan. So, I mean, I'll show this this image. It's a painting by Magritte in 1928-29, and this French actually says, "This is not a pipe." So, I mean, what we are looking at is the reality of this painting is that you're not looking at the pipe, but you're looking at a flat piece of paper. So its reality is actually a flat paper, not pipe. So he was actually, it's an actually illusion or construction. So actually, Magritte is challenging this concept that whatever we look, the objective, he was actually challenging the objectivity of perception. So, I mean, at times what we see as real might not be real. So, I mean, that's what I think is the role of the artist and the cartoonist, to challenge, your perceptions about the reality. And sometimes I think they create some new symbols and new totems about reality. So I mean, in that sense, I have my objectives of this book was to tell the political history of Pakistan, and also to claim a space for images and their role in education, and to create or to broaden the visual vocabulary in Pakistan. And hopefully, I think that narrative would challenge the already narrative within Pakistan that's being supported by the state and the religious extremist elements.
Great. Well, that's a fascinating story. It's well told. Thank you very much for that. I want to turn to Brian now and see if you've got any thoughts on what you've heard. How would you put this into a broader context for the audience?
Thank you, Sabr. First let me say how pleased I am that you're here as a fellow. I met Sabr for the first time about 10 years ago in Lahore, and as somebody who reads political cartoons regularly, I just thought it would be a great idea to have a political cartoonist here. I think, as you can all see from his work, his story is they're not just beautiful images, but to understand and really to comprehend what he's getting at requires a deep and profound understanding of Pakistan. And so I think, for a start, as having our first cartoonist here, you really set the bar extremely high, and I hope Sally and everyone else will seek out other cartoonists and welcome you back in the future. As Sabr has clearly explained, political cartooning is part of the political discourse in Pakistan, as it is in our country, and often serves to frame sensitive issues in a manner that's both provocative, challenging, and often humorous. But as clearly as the case with Sabr's work, cartoonists also need to understand how far to push certain issues. Although we often talk about red lines and taboo subjects, other than the laws like Thailand's lèse majesté laws, knowing where those lines is more art than science. So who better than an artist or a cartoonist to help navigate these waters? Finding the right symbols, understanding the lines that can't or need to be crossed, and challenging authority is always risky, as it clearly is in Pakistan today. Sabr deserves much credit for tackling these issues in an intelligent, enlightening, and funny manner. As we were preparing for today's discussion, I kept thinking about one of my favorite high school classes and best teachers. The class was American history, and the teacher used political cartoons to teach and test. Exams would often be nothing more than political cartoons you had to explain and analyze. Could you situate the cartoon in the proper historical context? Did you know the various people and symbols in the cartoons? Did you understand why the cartoon was controversial? How did the cartoon challenge authority? If I'm being entirely honest, I often find myself these days, when I don't spend nearly as much time looking at Pakistan as I would like, looking at Saber's cartoons with the thought, I think I understand, knowing full well that if he were to test me on my understanding, I might be retaking the class next year. And let me also know, as listening to Saber give this lecture today and watching the audience, you could see the Pakistanis all laughing and getting his joke. Whereas some of the others looked a little baffled, and I would just say, if you get the context of what he's cartooning about, you would understand, as I'll show you in a minute with some examples of American cartoons, how controversial and sensitive and provocative some of what he was, almost everything of what he showed us today actually was. Now let me turn to show you two cartoons from Herblock, a famous American cartoonist from the 1950s, and one from 2008 from Barry Blitt, that I think, in a sense, explore and expand upon many of the controversial issues and subjects that Saber is talking about. So, you can do it. There are only 2 slides, so you can help me here. The first of these two these are Herblock cartoons. And in Saber's work, as you saw, lots of what he was looking at was blasphemy. And when I was trying to think about how do you contextualize this, how do you explain it, and what sort of parallels can we see, it really drew me back to Herblock's cartoons of McCarthyism. So in the 1950s, like in Pakistan, McCarthyism and McCarthy fabricated information to tarnish people, to undermine their reputations, to imprison them. And it was often done with nothing but the threat of production of material, much like many of the blasphemy cases in Pakistan. But the other one, this one on the right, was also about the profound failure of people in power who knew what was wrong to stand up to what was wrong. And so this is a cartoon about Eisenhower, in essence, understanding that this was a problem, but never challenging McCarthy directly. But it took somebody like Herblock and others who were willing to go out on a limb and to challenge what was increasingly a dominant narrative in our country, much like the blasphemy cases as are in Pakistan, luckily without the threat of extreme violence as we've seen.
So this is Eisenhower on the right.
Yes, exactly,
and
on the right. And I would just say, in a sense, the comparison is that the blasphemy cases become so dangerous, as you said, that the assassinations of Salman Taseer and Shahbaz Bhatti and others, that speaking out on issues which really require somebody to challenge it does have real risks in the country, but there are cartoonists and others who find a way to look at this. And the second cartoon is perhaps one of the most controversial cartoons we've seen in our country in a long time. It's from The New Yorker, and it's a cover by Barry Blitt from 2008. And this is when Obama was still a junior senator from Illinois contesting for the presidency, and there was a growing narrative about Obama and increasingly about Michelle Obama. And when I was looking through Saber's slides for this presentation, there were 3 cartoons that he showed that I think really resonated with me and drew me to pull out this one. One was the picture of the cartoon of the portraits of Jinnah, and how 3 different people, a political leader, a military leader, and an Islamist, were trying to capture Jinnah's image. What did Jinnah stand for as a way to define the state of Pakistan? The second was the painting altering the Pakistani flag. And this is the sacred image of the flag, desecration of the flag, but I think in many ways altering the flag is a profoundly challenging thing for many politicians in the country. And to be willing to challenge people through art, through cartooning, struck me as having a parallel here. And the third one was the conspiracy theories, which I'll grant you in Pakistan put our conspiracy theories, we don't do justice to it, but we still have our own. And this cartoon was highly, highly controversial. But I think it really playfully teases out many of these similar issues, right? In essence, this is a cartoon that mocks people in our country who see Obama as not American, not a Christian, aligned with bin Laden, who you can see in the thing, married to a black militant, and conspiring to undermine America with the flag in the fireplace. And so in one image, it brings together much of what you have done over a series of things, really getting at, for people in a country, defining your history, defining your origins, and defining what it means to be Pakistani. And challenging that authority in Pakistan really cuts across the political boundaries, cuts across time. And I would just applaud you for your courageous efforts to keep pushing the boundaries here, keep redefining the boundaries, and ensuring that those of you, and there are others in this room who are equally courageous, continue to struggle for democracy in Pakistan.
That's great. Well, thank you. Let's open it up for questions from the audience, since I know there will be questions. We've got two here in the front row. We'll start with you.
My question for Sabir is that, you know, all those years you have been pinching the most powerful lobbies in Pakistan, the military, the politicians, the mafias, the paramilitary political groups. What has been the reaction? How much have you been harassed, and how? And why do you still choose to live in Pakistan?
Tell us who you are. We're just,
My name is Murtaza Solangi. I'm a journalist from Pakistan.
okay, thank you.
Well, I think I've faced a lot of threats and pressures right from the start. I mean, it started with, there was a time when one actually information minister asked my editor to fire him. He said, well, what's the reason? He said, because he draws our very good-looking prime minister very badly, you know. So, I mean, there could be all sorts of pressures and reasons. But I think now I live in Pakistan, probably because I think I'm now addicted to these threats. And whenever there isn't any hate mail or any threats, I think maybe I am gone soft, you know, or my cartoons are not working.
Yeah, Carl?
Carl Gershman from NED. First, I want to associate myself with Brian's comments, which I share very, very strongly. And I have a question about the cartoon about the flag. I mean, I didn't realize that the white and the green were really the majority, the minority, and the minorities and the majority. And I found that rather surprising. In other words, it would be shocking to an American to have a flag that would distinguish different parts of the population according to color. And, you know, it's not just that some people might find it offensive, but it goes against the spirit of the country that somehow we're all integrated. And I assume that that's an idea that you are sympathetic to. In other words, that Pakistan should be a country in which the majority and the minority, whether they're Christian or Shia or what have you, are all part of a single country called Pakistan. And how would, you know, first of all, do you think there's a problem with the way the flag is drawn? But not to get into that, how would you conceptualize a flag for Pakistan that would really illustrate a pluralistic and unified country?
But I actually agree with you, and that's not my interpretation of this flag. That was how it was described in our books, and even you can find a lot of references to that how this flag was designed. And of course, I think that was, you pointed it very rightly, that even this distinction goes against the democratic values. And I believe that all the citizens within Pakistan of any religion, of any race, of any provinces, they should be, and they are actually the equal citizens have equal rights. That I think is our goal. But right now, I think it's not, the situation is as I have shown you in the figure. But that is what is exactly the ideal that we must strive for, and that's what I believe
Do you have an idea of how you might illustrate this? Would there be a way to
Yeah, I think
draw
that should be a unified one color that,
Mhm.
that it represents a full one nation actually, and that is actually this signifies a division within that nation. You know that there's one person that's different, and there's one person that's one portion that's different.
We've got someone here at the very back, and several people on this side. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Iftikhar Hussain. I work for Voice of America, Pashto to the border region. We have a 9 hours of live broadcast to the border regions, the Pashtun belt of Pakistan, and south and east of Afghanistan. Thank you very much, Sabir. I like your cartoons. I watched them, and you didn't show the one on Malala. I was looking for that even. But it speaks a volume about the recent web of extremism and the discourse in Pakistan. I just wonder, as a reporter and somebody from Peshawar, that as a cartoonist, what do you think your job has changed? Has it become more difficult and dangerous? Because cartoons, political cartoons, has been traditionally an area where most of the criticism being tolerated in Pakistani, especially from the English press. Given the circumstances of the recent extremism, how much your job has changed? Is it more difficult and dangerous for you? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was one time where you can say that there was a division of English media and the vernacular or the Urdu media. But I think recently, after this social media, now there is no actually, those spaces have actually, I think, blurred. Any cartoon that's published in an English paper, that would go viral on the social media, and anybody could, access that. So I think now and that is why it has become more dangerous, because now it's wide open to different, and even, outside Pakistan. And actually, you can now access all the digital archives, actually. If there is something, you can, dig up the old. That is what is actually, I think, more dangerous. We just had a recent case when one lecturer was charged because of some Facebook status that was, I think, some 1 year back. So he was charged on blasphemy charges. So I think that's why it's now difficult to, segregate all these sections. At one time, yes, you were right, and there were a lot of columnists and critics who would always say that let these the cartoonists and these columnists or these liberals be buried in 500 readers. So at one time that was true, but now I think that's not the case.
Tim Ryan from the Solidarity Center. And as a person who's worked as a writer in graphic novels and comics, I have to ask the softball question, which is, what comic artists and fine artists do you feel have really influenced you? Because you're excellent both as a comic artist and a draftsman and as a fine artist. So it's very interesting to see those skills all in one person.
Actually, quite a few that really actually inspired me, but I just forgot the name of that French artist who knew this. The comic artist, the comic books of 30 comic books, Obelisk series, yeah. So I think that was the artist that really inspired me, and there was another cartoonist, that Indian R.K. Lakshman. So, because I think that their drawing was a bit different from, I would describe these as two styles. There is one that is an Asian Indian style, or maybe a Japanese style of drawing, and there is one that's more European. If you see the cartoons, and especially in America, they are more very detailed, very fine, craftsmanship you can see. But especially in the case of obelisk and what's the name for obelisk? Asterix, yeah.
Asterix.
So I mean, you will see the same influence of this brush drawing. That what I saw with Arki Lakshman. And thirdly, I think I like a lot of this mad magazine cartoonist. I mean, Mort Drucker, that was simply excellent. But I think it was, I really forgot his name, but majority of this Mad magazine cartoonist, I like to copy that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, we had someone here in the middle. Who had your hands up? Oh, you already addressed it. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? There's one there.
Hi, my name is Jenna Gibson. I'm with Reporters Without Borders. So I guess you mentioned a little bit, but I was wondering if you could go into more detail about the specific threats or the specific issues that you face as a visual artist, or making these comments in a visual medium versus, I know there are a lot of threats for journalists in general. So what are some of the, I guess, differences being a cartoonist versus being maybe a print journalist or a broadcast journalist, some of the issues there?
I think now it's a very common practice, and these threats and these they are actually now visible, and they are on either on your Facebook or on your pages. So these are actually now visible. I mean, before that it was something that I mean, either there were some cases against you or some really threats. But now I think I feel this threat or this pressure every day, and at times actually I had to remove some of the cartoons or some of my work, because you immediately get that feedback and the threats. And at times one person actually said that now we need a fatwa to some religious fatwa against you to So I mean that's immediately you get this response, and I think it's been mounting this pressure just recently. Of course, the journalists, they are also under threat, and cartoonists are just one small element in journalism, and I think that especially the electronic media journalists, they are also under a very severe threat, and actually they are always in the field. And that's what happened with our group. There were three actually electronic media people with the cameramen and all. They were killed recently. 3 people were killed of my group. So I mean, that's more dangerous for them. At least we have this. Since I work from home, so I have this protection. I'm not directly exposed to such threats.
Are there personalities on television like The Daily Show here, satirical news programs or anything like that? Do you have that in Pakistan?
We have just recently we saw this emergence of comedy shows on the television. But interestingly, you will see that in Urdu journalism, and some of the newspapers are sold because of the columnists. And the advertising campaigns usually depend on what kind of a columnist they have. So they are very famous columnists. But if you see, I mean, there could be, I think, more than 500 columnists in Pakistan, but you will only find 2 humorist columnists. So that shows, that how, what kind of a tolerance we have towards the humor or the cartoons. But just recently we saw this on electronic media, and it seemed like the people were, hungry for this for, I think, the years that it was just came up so sharply in electronic media.
That's great. One here.
Charles Self with 227 International. I was struck by your remark that the cartoonist creates an image that is in conflict with text, and I assume you mean a dominant social text. and then that the cartoonist confronts individuals in this way with a new reality or a different kind of reality. I wonder what you think the role of that is, and particularly in a society that is very conservative and trying to preserve the traditional ways of understanding reality. Do you see this as something that is contributing to the development of society, or is this almost a revolutionary kind of task that the cartoonist must embrace?
I think that was generally in the context of the pressures that we feel as visual artists, I would say as image makers. So in that context, yes, I believe. I don't believe that there's a war of word or image. I think they both complement each other. They both have a different way of visualizing and a different way of expression, but they are not mutually, exclusive. The point there actually was that, especially in our society, I feel this, and especially in a profession or in a career, which is also a text-dominated, where I think I realized that this is the most actually acute problem for not only the cartoonists, but also the painters and image makers. And as you see, I've shown the three horse sculptures. After that, we actually installed 3 army men actually in the same area, and that was actually destroyed by the vigilante groups. It was set on fire. So there is a serious issue of claiming a space for or the right to create images. That's how I look at it.
David?
Yes, I found very interesting the point that you often use foreign dictators as stand-ins for local politicians. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And are you sure that people get it? I mean, have you had good feedback on that?
Well, actually, I cannot be sure about that, because I believe that the message that people get varies from people to individual to individual. So there is never actually en masse one message, and I think that is also the beauty of this medium. I mean, it's a kind of a unified one message that everybody gets across. But I think the only test or only to evaluate this, I think, is because how people respond to those cartoons, or how many people like those cartoons. I think that's the only criteria that I can judge whether this message went across or not.
And then Art, yeah.
Art Kaufman, World Movement for Democracy. My question is whether you have what we might call proteges, and or do you know of other cartoonists who are also engaging in this kind of political cartooning? Is there space for that? Are there people following in your footsteps?
Yes, I think there is now space also. There are a few good cartoonists, and in fact now I think a lot of there are actually very few cartoonists in Pakistan, but I can say that the few cartoonists, they actually get a salary higher than the editors of the op-ed pages. So that, I think, for me, is another criterion to judge, that now these newspapers, and they value this work of the cartoonist in their newspapers. Before that, I think it was just, as I said about the paper, just to fill the space, or used as mostly as the fillers. But now I think there is a space. There are young cartoonists who are coming up.
So I have 2 questions for you. One is, how many times have you presented a cartoon that your editor simply felt was too controversial to publish? I mean, have you ever been in conflict with your editor about, isn't an acceptable cartoon? And the second question is there a cartoon you want to draw that you don't feel safe to draw in Pakistan now?
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of times when my cartoons were rejected, and it's actually because I'm not editor's cartoonist. I mean, there are a lot of cartoonists who actually work very closely with the editors, and usually they don't have any conflict. But I don't work in that way. So, I mean, over the years now, I think they have accepted me as I am, and I don't create boundaries for myself. I'll make a cartoon. If that is rejected, I'll just make a replace it with any other cartoon, but don't make these as restrictions on myself. So, but recently I have seen almost every week one of my cartoon is being rejected. But that's what that's what I say, that the space is being restricted in Pakistan. And yes, there are a few cartoons that I really want to draw, but I think right now I cannot. There are subjects. I mean, I think for 6 to 7, 8 years, maybe 6 or 8 years, I had this cartoon, but I could not draw. I mean, nobody would be ready to publish that. And you saw a few cartoons that I've showed you about the blasphemy law. I mean, that was, the idea was to show an 800-pound gorilla within the room. And the politicians are saying that, no, we don't need the military operation against them. We just need to hold political dialogue with that, who has actually destroyed the whole room. And that's what's been going on in Pakistan as the extremist groups are doing.
Any last questions? If not, okay, we've got two here. One here. Okay.
Kiran Pervez from the Department of State. It's wonderful to hear you have grown up reading or looking at your cartoons and thinking about them. And there was one question, this is kind of a convoluted question, so I hope you'll allow me that. But so between the feedback that you get and the observations that you have of Pakistani society and the inspiration you draw on, I'm just curious to know, I mean, we hear things like, especially after the elections, right, that, oh, we've got this youth bulge and they're much more politically active, and as compared to previous generations that weren't as politically engaged. I mean, we keep hearing these blips about what's going on in Pakistani society, but I just really like to get your sense of, from I guess when you started drawing cartoons, and how you think the society has evolved, and to your mind, what might be some things to be hopeful about and what are some things to be just downright pessimistic about?
Well, actually, there are some elements that we should be hopeful about, but I think there are a lot of negative indicators what's going on right now in Pakistan. I mean, I could only say that the positive thing is that whatever I have been doing, I've been critical of what's been going on, but they are actually well received. So there are a lot of people who think I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people who think like me, and actually they appreciate my work. So it means that we are not alone. There is an element, and that is, I think, probably for me, that's the ray of hope for the next. Maybe that's a difficult time, and maybe we have some really political upheaval within a very near future in Pakistan. But still, I think that it's not the last cause. There are people, there are groups, there are individuals who actually think and are closer to our thinking, and I think that's a very positive sign.
Okay, here.
Thank you. For me and other aspiring political cartoonists in the room, do you have any particular advice? And I would keep it within your realm of very difficult topics, breaking taboos, where people don't want to hear your criticism?
Well, actually, I can only quote a very famous, my favorite cartoonist, Arki Lakshman. And he said, about three things that a cartoonist needs. Then he must be an excellent craftsman. And I think some people give the example of Picasso. I mean, if you look, he's a very great craftsman. But if you look at his work, it's more like caricatures. So the one thing is the craftsmanship. The second, I think he said, he must be an voracious reader, must read about everything under the sun. And thirdly, I think that he must have a funny bone in it.
Yeah, okay, right here.
Hi. I noticed that one of the pieces you showed us was a backdrop for a theatrical production, and I was wondering if you could speak to some of the ways that you've seen coordination between the arts in Pakistan or in other places that has been helpful in bringing a greater voice to the citizenry or promoting democracy and democratic values.
Yeah, the backdrop to the IRC.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship between theater and your artwork? Like, are you mixing, are you drawing things for theater groups, for musical groups, for any other art and culture? Like, what's the relationship?
Yeah, actually, yes. First, I believe that these all arts do have a relationship, and they actually influence each other. In fact, a lot of actually artistic movements, for example, surrealism, that started from poetry and came to painting. And I mean, some of the movements actually started from architecture that went to philosophy, like the postmodernism. So I think these all arts are related. And from the earliest, I think, childhood, I had a fascination with theater. And I remember when I was, I think maybe 6 or 7 years old, I saw the classic Indian plays just across my house in Kohar, and saw Kalidas, Shakuntala, and Ramayana, and Mahabharat. And actually, some of my teachers and critics think that my work actually represents that how I place my figures in my cartoons or in paintings, they just resemble how actors are placed on a proscenium theater. So since I was always advocating about using the image, so that's how few of my friends, they thought they could produce a play on the political history of Pakistan, and they would use my cartoons as a backdrop. So that's how this project started, and that's how I work with them.
Okay, well, let's call that a take. That was a really great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. I really enjoyed hearing that story, and it's an inspiring one for all of us. It's something we've learned a lot about by having you here with us during this period, and we really did benefit from your presence among us. And I think it drew my attention as someone who cares about media development to the pointed edge of humor as being a really, really important and difficult part of this whole area of media freedom. And it's a really, really interesting story, and I hope you will be able to continue this into the future. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much.